And so it begins. This chapter is the epitome of the saying that all good things must come to an end, and whilst I'm sure we were all expecting it, it doesn't take away from the pain and shock from witnessing it in action. Hello my Nakamatachi, this is JoyGirl with a review of chapter 993, The Dream of Wano. I think it's only right that we review the chapter in the order in which the events transpired to truly encapsulate its tone and effect, so let's start from the beginning. Firstly, the cover page. Each chapter, I wonder whether the adventures of Pound, the Charlotte twins and Beige will come to an end. And I dare say with this week's cover story of Lola and Gotti's wedding, we must be getting pretty close. I say close because I was previously told by a helpful Nakama that on the final volume, there is usually a comment written saying that it is the last volume of the cover page serial or something along those lines, and I didn't see one on this chapter, so it seems the journey will continue for at least a little bit longer. And I will be happy to move on to a new focus, but this one was quite cute. I first thought that Pez wasn't present at his auntie's wedding, but then I realized he's on Pound's head and it's just so cute to see them bonding like that. All the happiness from the celebration also added to the initial bright mood of the chapter, which underwent a drastic change by the end, and so this cover page also added to the intriguing tension of the chapter itself, and in saying that, let's move on to review the chapter. Chapter 993 starts off very bright and happy. The citizens at Wano are joyfully celebrating the fire festival, even the citizens of Ebisu Town, who only relatively recently lost their hero Yasui, and they all sing and dance and push away the dread of having to face the wretched Orochi whilst they can for the day. There are some pretty interesting figures or statues. I think they may be representative of the Wisdom Kings that Hyokoro mentioned not too long ago, but please let me know if you know what those large figures are. One of them looks like an Oni and seems to be the design that Yamato in his disguised form was emulating, which is fitting because I guess they're seen as protector spirits, and that's how Yamato sees himself, protecting the will of Odin. Anyways, it's clear that even though the Wano citizens are celebrating, they are only able to do so due to the hope that they hold. A hope that Odin's samurais will defeat Kaido along with Orochi so that they can permanently enjoy the fresh food and air that they are allowed on this one day. And already, the feeling of dread begins to rise inside of me because I think it's pretty clear it's not yet happy days for Wano. Far from it. And true enough, the chapter cut to Onigashima, whereas people at mainland Wano had speculated, the raid against the Yonko has indeed begun, but definitely has not been won. The contrast of the celebratory scene of the lanterns and joyful citizens to the first panel of the next page, which shows the skull of Onigashima, seemed to symbolize the impending doom. There was even a big tidal wave on the seas next to the skull, and one can assume that this is warning us that the tide of the battle is beginning to turn. Straight away, we realize the Alliance has their work cut out for them as Queen's special bullets Ice Oni is revealed. I'm assuming that these are the same bullets that were fired at Drake a few chapters ago, though I can't be sure because Drake doesn't seem to be affected, so maybe he dodged it, or maybe Queen is going through his very expansive arsenal, and this is yet another weapon. Ice Oni is another type of Excite bullet, which we were introduced to back in the Udon prisons, and his greatest Excite bullet yet. This one carries another infection which has a chilling effect before transforming its victims, unlike the mummy which dehydrated and caused a burning effect on its victims. I think that this one is more apt to be called the zombie because the infection seems to cause a transformed Oni to bite a nearby human, and maybe this is how the plague spreads. And if this is the case, then I wonder what makes Ice Oni a stronger or greater invention than the mummy, because the contagious ability of the mummy, which only required someone to touch another person, seems to be easier than the Ice Oni if it requires them to bite into another person. So maybe it has to do with how much it affects its victims, because Chopper was relatively easily able to cure those who were affected at the prison mines, or maybe even in their zombie-like forms, the Oni's speed and strength aren't affected and maybe even heightened so that they're actually able to capture more victims, cause Queen is quite confident in this new weapon. We move on to another area of Kaido's castle, following Luffy who is on the basement floor 1, still making his way to the roof to reach Kaido. And with all the different stuff going on at Onigashima across the different groups, it really helped that Oda showed us the layout of Onigashima's castle to tell us where everyone, or at least some of the groups, are currently situated, because it made it very much easier to follow everything. I hope we get to see a more detailed version of this in coming chapters. Sanji stopping Luffy from fighting to conserve his strength and helping the captain clear the way through the Beast Pirates achieved so much and was meaningful in my opinion. For one, it's always great to see some of Sanji's kicking action, and the squabble between the cook and his captain provided some nice humor in an otherwise sad and dark chapter. But also, I think Sanji wanting to help Luffy so much is repayment for Luffy going through all the trouble that he did to save Sanji on Whole Cake Island. And it's nice to see the Luffy and Sanji moment because Wano so far has mostly featured Luffy and Zoro as a duo together. We were also granted another look at a very odd Smile Zoan fruit ability as a headliner called Briscola spawns a gorilla from his arm, and I think this one, although still odd, is more practical compared to Hold'em or Dobon. But what do you guys think? Still not worth it? Meeting Briscola's Gorilla Punch is Jinbei's Fishman Karate with his own Shark Brick Fist, inviting Sanji's Fury who wanted to be the one to help Luffy. But I think Jinbei's offer to escort both Luffy and Sanji to the rooftop is actually a nice acknowledgement of Sanji's strength. It seems Jinbei recognizes that these two, along with Zoro, are going to be needed in the fight against Kaido. It also creates a possible and interesting setup as to whether Jinbei will be also joining in the fight against Kaido along with the monster trio later on, which would then solidify his position in terms of strength. Because this is a question that has been raised ever since Jinbei's inclusion to the crew. It would be cool if they met up with Zoro soon, and they progress through each level, and as they do so, they come across a foe that one of them will have to stay behind to fight, allowing Luffy to continue to the rooftop. In any case, the addition of Jinbei is very welcome as he brings a fresh air of maturity to the Straw Hats, as was displayed in his handling of Sanji, who in response acquiesced so quickly in this chapter. In another area, Shinobu and Momonosuke are still refusing to accept Yamato, their chase being reported on by Bao Huang through use of her ability. So it seems the way that her ability works is that the single eye symbol drawn on her mask can also grant her vision in other places, so long as that eye symbol is drawn someplace else. It's not confirmed whether this is a devil fruit ability in this chapter, so maybe it's an ability related to her tribal species. King uses the information reported to him by Bao Huang to order the Beast Pirates to kill Momonosuke, and amongst those listening are a few of the Tobiroppo. Speaking of whom, I wonder whether Who's Who has the same ability as Bao Huang. It wasn't shown in this chapter, but the tattoo on his chest is quite similar with a single eye. So I'm keen to see both Who's Who and Bao Huang with their masks off. Maybe they each have a third eye, or somehow related in another way. I mean, they also seem to share a cat or feline theme. Wouldn't it be crazy if it ended up that Bao Huang is controlling Who's Who through their shared eye? But I don't know. Do you think I'm reading too much into it? What do you guys think this tattoo means? Back to this chapter, King notes that the death of Momo will mark the end of this rebellion as the samurai's will to fight will be broken. But not all of the Tobiroppo were featured in this chapter when King was delivering this order. I do assume page 1 is still with Ulti, but perhaps the absence of Black Maria is again to showcase her disinterest in following the will of the Beast Pirates. Anyways, Sasaki is the first to find Momonosuke and orders his followers to fire at the Kozuki Air. Sasaki is also revealed to lead the armored division, and a lot of them look like an assortment of fishmen. One of them seems to be another interesting Smile user, some sort of rhino centaur who is transporting Sasaki and has a pirate symbol tattooed on the rhino head, and I wonder if this is a Jolly Roger design for Sasaki's crew. Another one has Hari written on his belt, which according to a Google search means needle in Japanese. And needle would make sense because he looks like a spiky porcupine. Another one or two of them seems to be beast pirates whom we've seen before. I think Zoro fought at least against one of them back in chapter 983. This one especially already seems to have battle scars, possibly from a fight against our Santoru swordsman? This would be fun to confirm, so maybe someone could ask in an SBS. So the name of the division that Sasaki is leading seems to be in reference to their strength, maybe their strong defense capabilities. Most of them are packing multiple weapons, and speaking of which, Shinobu is a badass for saving Momonosuke and absorbing all of those attacks. I found it particularly admirable because we were told before she has a fear of sharp objects, but we see her painfully withstand all of those sharp arrows anyways, sacrificing herself to protect Momo, whom she tells to run away. And I think this says a lot about her character and her devotion to the cause. Momonosuke, in return, is conflicted as to whether a shogun would run away so simply like that. And I think it's great to see the consistent changing attitude of Momo's. He's showing more and more of his growing courage, and I can't wait to see his continued development. But it's not his moment to shine yet, and this time he's saved by Yamato, who has committed to the cause of the Kozuki family in this war. And I think this may be what is needed for Momonosuke to believe Yamato. I'll be keen to see their interaction following this exchange, provided that they're able to make it out. And as Yamato declares his participation in the war, it seems his father has made a similar decision. Because we are taken up to the rooftop dome, picking up where we left off last chapter, which ended with that glorious blow to Kaido. But Kaido, as expected, isn't out of the battle. He gets up, mentioning that he wouldn't have minded if the Scabbards were actually strong enough to kill him, and this, along with the following line, to me suggests that he is reminded of Odin every time his wound aches, and as a result, reminded of the feeling of being at the brink of death. And so since then, he's been searching for this feeling again, which is why he would have welcomed it if the Scabbards were indeed strong enough to fulfill his desire to once again meet someone strong enough to kill him. But in that case, unfortunately for both Kaido and the Scabbards, he says that no samurai will ever be as monstrous as Odin. The Scabbards weren't even able to reopen Kaido's old wound, and I'm sure this line encourages all of us Zoro fans to speculate on a possible Zoro moment who, with his newly acquired Enma, may be the one to slice open Kaido's belly once more. Considering that Kaido was unaffected by the attack from the last chapter, it does certainly seem like ordinary swords won't work. And so Kaido launches his next attack, and this time it's effective. Heartbreakingly so. His attack of invisible slashes slices through and breaks Kiku's sword and what seems to be her arm. I'm really hoping that Law may be able to reattach her arm, but I'm not sure it works that way. I think for the past few chapters, as we witness the Scabbards land their attacks and seemingly harm Kaido, most of us were expecting something like this to happen. I know I was certainly waiting for Kaido to inflict some pretty heavy damage, and some part of me was even excited, albeit fearfully so, but I am devastated that it is Kiku and her sword that is broken. Kiku's sword is the only one out of the Scabbards which we knew to be a named sword, so it's pretty fitting that hers is the one to be destroyed first, even if Kaido wasn't specifically aiming for her, which I don't think he was, but it does seem very symbolic that this potential for the Scabbards to actually damage Kaido has been destroyed. In fact, the fact that Kiku was the first to be affected by Kaido is very symbolic in various ways. Along with her sword, she's the only one armored, and so for Kaido to blow past it and rip off her arm with his attack is as if to say that nothing, no armor, no shield can protect you from Kaido. His insurmountable strength and the impossibility of defeating him even after the Scabbards' joint insane attack is reminiscent of the fight between Luffy and the Yonko. Kaido took Luffy's attack and dominated the Straw Hat Captain in the end. And this makes me think that this is actually Kaido's strategy: to experience or test his enemies' attacks and gauge their level of strength. Which has me even more nervous for what Kaido has in store for the Scabbards next. I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg, and now that Kaido has truly joined the war, he is going to be unleashing his terror on the samurais. The way that I see this playing out is Kaido will take out the Scabbards one by one or by twos, such as the Zou Guardians, and this will mean by chapter 999 all the Scabbards will have been defeated, maybe with Ashura dying in the 999th chapter, leaving chapter 1000 to give us a great comeback from the Alliance, possibly with some external help. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Back to this chapter, I was tense the entire time, just waiting for Kaido's attack. The way that Oda created this tension and suspense, through the contrast between the happiness of the Wano citizens to the darkness of the war at Onigashima, was brilliantly executed. It was just a shocking show of crushed hopes and destroyed dreams, a theme hinted throughout the chapter and then culminating in the final panels. So, as much as I can't wait for the next chapter, I'm also scared to see who might be the next victim. And it doesn't seem like we'll have to wait that long, seeing as there is no break next week. But in saying that, this brings me to the end of this chapter review. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter by leaving a comment below, and please like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.